Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. A lot of people wonder what the point is of meditation because we get recommendations a lot to practice meditation to bring that into the recovery setting. In fact, there's recovery programs that have meditation as a major part of the program, like Refuge Recovery, and even to an extent, 12-step programs. And when I first started meditating, and this was back when I was in my active addiction, when I first started meditating, my goal was to find a way to calm my head down, to stop feeling the anxiety that I was feeling that was driving so much of the unpleasant parts of my life. But what I found was that as I continued to practice meditation, as I continued to get into it, I was able to come upon a new level of self-awareness. Unfortunately, in my active addiction, that wasn't always the best thing because that level of self-awareness, I didn't have much guidance as to what to do with that. And extreme self-awareness in the mind of a person in active addiction is not necessarily conducive to a healing process. But in recovery, it's been incredibly useful. And I want to read a little bit from Going to Pieces Without Falling Apart by Mark Epstein, what he says about this, and then talk some about my experience with meditation in recovery. He says, in a less obvious way, but by using similar mechanisms, our own endless and repetitive thoughts squeeze the life out of life, vigilantly guarding against the loss of self that we fear. One of the most profound aspects of intensive meditation practice is that it throws us up against this very phenomenon. The sheer volume of pointless thinking that is going on inside our heads becomes inescapable in the quiet of meditation. For many people, this comes as quite a shock. We are used to thinking of thinking as a good thing and as that which makes us human. It can be quite a revelation to discover that so much of our thinking appears to be boring, pointless, repetitive, while keeping us isolated and cut off from the feelings of connection that we most value. Thinking too much and thinking constantly have always been problems of mine. And it wasn't until I started really doing meditation, really engaging in meditation, that I understood the mechanisms by which I could refocus my mind away from my thinking and on to other things. And that brought a level of self-awareness I had never really had before. I've always thought of myself as a very self-aware person. But when I recognized that I had the ability to shift focus, and in the meditation, the most common meditation that I do is just a breathing meditation where I'm focusing on the breath, and if I notice that my mind starts to wander, I just gently bring it back to the breath. And just the act of practicing that helps me become familiar with how often my mind wanders into these other places, into these thoughts that are often full of anxiety, that are often full of the useless thinking that he mentions in the book. So often I'll find myself planning out the day, thinking about what's going to happen that day when I'm trying to meditate, when I'm trying to be calm, when I'm trying to just focus on the breath. And it's interesting to remind myself that that's not what's important right this second, that I need to refocus on the breath. And that also raises the natural question of, well, when is it important to think through the day, to plan out the day? And there are some days where it's not important to do that. I'm just used to doing that. And so I get this kind of obsession with, I got to have everything planned out. I got to have, everything planned from morning to night. And meditation reminds me that I can take a step back and look at my thoughts and make a decision of, just because I'm having this thought, is it something I need to focus on, or should I shift my focus elsewhere? A lot of my anxiety and fear comes not from what I think in and of itself, but from the fact that I'm focusing on those thoughts. If I have an extreme fear about, for example, speaking in public, and I love speaking in public. I like to get up in front of other people and speak. But whenever I prepare to do that, I have a fear. I get afraid. Palms get sweaty. My heart starts racing, and I naturally, in that situation, will refocus not on that fear, but on what are the next steps in the process? What am I going to do next? And I'll refocus on, what is the first line of my speech? What is the second line of my speech? And refocus on thoughts that actually matter, that actually will help me in what I'm doing next, rather than on the fear that if I get caught up in, I have a hard time getting out of. This kind of refocusing of my attention away from particular thoughts and more on just what's happening in the moment has been really helpful in recovery. And I couldn't have done that without learning more about meditation and practicing meditation on a daily basis. I do not do an intense 30-minute or hour meditation every day, but I do take at least a few minutes every day to just sit and be quiet and let my brain do its thing, but also carefully bring it back to where I want it to focus. So if I'm doing a meditation just on my breath, and watching my breath, and trying to focus on that, just watching my thoughts as they drift into something else and then gently bringing them back, that's a really helpful way for me to remain conscious and cognizant of where my thoughts are leading me, and being able to bring them back to a place where I want them to be, rather than just letting them run away with me, which is what really got me into a lot of trouble in my active addiction. Learning to let the brain be is a good thing, but also learning when we can refocus it and when it might be appropriate to refocus our thoughts. That's also an important part of what I've been doing in recovery, and that's why meditation has been important to me and may be useful to you if you find yourself getting caught up in a lot of negative thoughts and emotions as part of recovery. That's it for today. I'll be back here tomorrow with more. Have a good one.